I'm also being joined by Spencer Critchley from the United States of America. Mr. Critchley, I want to begin by asking you, sir, what really have you learned further about the assassin? And is there any explanation that has been given so far about the security lapses that took place at Donald Trump's rally?
We know very little about the assassin so far. His name, as you've probably heard, is Thomas Matthew Crooks. He's 20 years old and he lives nearby the site of the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. He has no criminal record as far as I understand so far, so there would have been no reason for local authorities to be keeping an eye on him. He is a registered Republican for whatever that might mean. Although a few years ago he donated to Act Blue, which is a fundraising site that specializes in support for Democratic candidates. So I don't know what we can glean from that. And of course, it's always a good idea to be very careful about speculating in advance of having solid information to go on. At this stage, we have no idea what his motivation might have been or any other details connected with this attempted assassination. In terms of the security lapse, I'm not an expert in security, although I have been at multiple presidential campaign events and watched the Secret Service work. And like I think everybody else who's been in that situation, have just been enormously impressed, not only by their professionalism, but by their incredible dedication. These are people who, after all, will without a thought risk their own lives to defend a candidate or other protectee, independent of whatever their own political preferences might be. And we saw that in the behavior of the agents around former President Trump last evening, when immediately his security detail, the ones in plain clothes who people recognize from so much television, immediately put their own bodies around him and formed a human wall around him, even going so far as to raise their hands and arms to try to block any kind of line of sight towards his head while they worked to move him off stage as safely as they could and as quickly as they could, once again at the risk of their own lives. So I can remember on the Obama campaign in 2008, I happened to be taking photographs of Obama frequently as one of the things that I did.
Yes.
And so I was frequently standing close to him and standing close to Secret Service agents. And as I say, I was just enormously impressed by them. Now, there is a big question right now as to how that shooter was able to get up on top of the roof of a neighboring building. And so far, questions focus on the advance work. In advance of an event like this, the Secret Service sends an advance agent and team out to scout the location and come up with a detailed plan for every moment of the event. And of course, they check the sight lines for every location where the principal might be. And that's an obvious sightline, it seems to me, again, as a non-expert, for a shooter. So I think the main question at the moment is how was he able to gain access to that roof in the first place? It might have been difficult to see him once he did get up there, but I think for me the question right now is how did he get up there in the first place?
Absolutely, and that's a question for everyone as well. Mr. Critchley, I also want to understand from you, sir, how exactly is the public in America at this point in time reacting to this assassination attempt?
Well, it's hard there is no unified response, except that I think that everybody who believes in democracy or basic human decency is shocked and horrified. There are some partisans who are already trying to glean political advantage from this event, which I think is reprehensible. And I certainly don't intend to do that immediately after such an attempt. But from what I've seen, as I say, amongst people who believe in democracy or just people of goodwill who believe in basic human decency, that has been uniform expressions of horror, not only because it's so deeply wrong, of course, to attack any human being, but in the context of a democracy, an attack on a political candidate is an attack on democracy itself. So it's something none of us can tolerate.
Mr. Critchley, at the same time, you spoke about how there are some people who are trying to gain political mileage out of what has happened. It has been very dramatic, the sequence of events that have taken place, the visuals and the photographs that have come out. We've seen Donald Trump then also continuing on with his rallies thereafter. He was seen exiting from a flight at night and making his way to another event. What really do you think is the message that he's then sent out to America after what has happened, given the fact that there was an assassination attempt, but within 2 minutes, we saw him rising back up from the podium with his fist in the air and saying that he's going to continue fighting? What's the message that he has sent out, as per you?
If I may, my understanding is that immediately after the event, just as a technical detail, he flew to Bedminster, New Jersey, where he has a golf club and residence, and spent the evening there. He has issued a couple of statements since then. But it's a good question, because so much of politics happens in the realm of symbolism and emotion, as opposed to just the simple, factual, logical content of whatever is happening from one moment to the next. And so former President Trump's response of immediately standing up and raising his fist, and the photos of that behavior that resulted, are enormously powerful politically. At bottom, any political campaign appeals to the basic human desire for a strong leader, no matter how a person might define a strong leader. And this is something that political candidates need to learn, or else risk losing, that it really, at this level, does not matter very much what you're saying. It matters how you say it. And much of that is visual, or in the sound of your words, as opposed to the actual content. And so his behavior in that moment, as I say, was enormously powerful symbolically, as was the assassination attempt. As terrible as it is, to have an attempt on his life also puts him in the position of a potential martyr on behalf of the cause he says he represents.
Yes.
And then to have him survive that attempt makes him seem all the stronger to the people who already wanted to follow him.
So is there then some chatter about how this assassination attempt could impact the upcoming elections? Are people already somewhere talking about that, discussing that? What are they saying?
Yes, political professionals certainly are aware of the power of symbolism, as I just described. And so, again, it's uncomfortable to talk in these terms after this man almost lost his life, and
yes,
another person at the rally actually did, and two others, as I understand, are very seriously injured. But yes, political professionals recognize that this can be a great boost to former President Trump's campaign, depending on how he handles his response to it. If he is able to respond with some kind of dignity and statesmanship, I think it will accrue all the more to his advantage. If not, then I think he will lose much of that advantage, at least among swing voters. And similarly, on the Democratic side, I'm glad to see that the Biden campaign immediately suspended their political activities for the time being and started scrambling to get the TV networks and local stations to stop playing Biden campaign commercials for now. And that President Biden came out and made a very strong public statement, not only deploring this event, but deploring political violence of all kinds. So I think politically, that is, of course, exactly the right thing to do. But in my opinion, as so often happens, it's morally the right thing to do. And as cynical as politics can get, based on my own experience, I have found that doing the right thing very often turns out to be the smart thing to do, too. It's as hard as it can be for people who see themselves as hard-bitten realists to believe. But if you start with the truth and start with doing your very best to do the right thing, it's like occupying the high ground that everybody else can only try to displace you from.
Okay, Mr. Critchley, I'd also like to understand from you then. Of course, Donald Trump has been extremely fortunate to survive this assassination bid. But do you feel that somewhere what has happened could possibly regurgitate some conversation about a culture of gun violence in the United States of America? Or will this simply become a political conversation at the end of the day?
No, certainly it will. Unfortunately, I'm not confident it will lead to much progress. There has been some progress on gun violence under President Biden. He was able to get bipartisan gun legislation through as one of his accomplishments. It makes a difference, but only a small difference, unfortunately. I know he and many others would like to see more and keep working on that. But the two sides on this issue are polarized the way they are polarized on many other issues. And it's extremely difficult to find common ground on an issue when you're not actually even living in a common reality in many ways. For one side, the Constitution doesn't provide any absolutely unrestricted rights. You have a right to free speech that's very broad, but it's not absolutely unrestricted. And neither is any other right. The moment you start to do harm to other people, your rights begin to be restricted. And so on one side, the belief is there should be some kind of reasonable regulations on ownership of a lethal device like a gun. On the other side, the gun is a symbol of freedom that goes back to the American Revolution, and there should be no restrictions on it whatsoever. And their argument would be precisely the opposite, not that guns should be regulated, but that everybody at that event should have been carrying a gun, and then they all presumably could have fired back. I think many of us with any experience in this area, and I do have some experience in that area, would say that would lead to far more injuries and deaths in the melee that would result with a bunch of amateurs firing off their guns. But unfortunately, I think that polarization will continue and probably intensify, at least in the coming days.
And do you feel that it does not then, as per your analysis or opinion, does not put the Republicans on the back foot as far as conversations about gun violence are concerned? Because Joe Biden has made that a commitment of his campaign. In fact, just a few days ago, he posted on social media, he said that we want to regulate guns in America, we want to ban guns in America, but it's Donald Trump. He literally named him, saying that he will never do it. They will never go against the gun lobby. So do you feel that could this somewhere put the Republicans on a back foot, the fact that this incident has taken place at the rally of Donald Trump? Or, like I said, that conversation just does not exist?
Well, it puts them on the back foot with the majority of Americans, as they already were. And by the way, just a small adjustment to what you just said. President Biden does not want to ban guns. He does want to regulate them.
Yes.
The great majority of Americans, including the great majority of gun owners, believe in sensible gun regulations. For example, checking, the criminal or mental health background of somebody before they're allowed to purchase a gun, which seems like, basic common sense, I think, to most people, and certainly to the great majority of Americans. And this is an issue on which the Republican Party is backing a position that's held by somewhere between 20 to 30 some percent of the population in the face of an overwhelming majority against, including, as I say, the great majority of gun owners, including the majority of members of the National Rifle Association, one of the leading pro-gun lobbies. However, guns have enormous symbolic importance to the base of their party these days. And they're able to leverage that issue for political advantage, despite the fact that it looks like a losing issue. It also, this is also related to the arcane ways in which our elections work, which might be too complicated for us to get into here, but with the Electoral College and the way congressional districts are drawn, it's possible sometimes to win even though you have a losing position, and this is one of those examples.
Okay, Mr. Critchley, before we let you go, like I said, just a few hours back, and I just wanted to cross-check. You said he's talking about regulating guns, Joe Biden, not banning guns. But just 20 hours ago, he had posted on X saying, "I want to," and I'm quoting here, "I want to ban assault weapons and require universal background checks." So, do you feel that somewhere when they talk about ban, the focus, in fact, is regulation and it's not on banning assault weapons or guns itself?
Right. So the assault weapons ban, that's right. He favors a ban on assault weapons, which are these AR-15 style rapid fire weapons, which are designed to destroy the human body, essentially. That's what they mean by assault weapon.
Which is what, as per information, pardon me, I'm interrupting you, but I think that is what was used at this particular event as well, as per information.
As I understand it, yes. And this design of rifle is actually quite accurate from hundreds of yards. So not only is it enormously damaging at close range, but even at long range, it's possible to carry out an assassination attempt with one of these weapons. And so, yes, and that kind of weapon was banned for about 10 years, if I remember right, and it appeared to have a significant effect in reducing mass killings. This, again, though, gets back to this symbolic role of guns.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in people who I believe are just deeply irresponsible in the gun industry and are pursuing profits at any cost, promote citizens possessing assault weapons as a defense against their own government, as if they're protecting their freedom against their own democratically elected government. And that's a large part of the intensity connected to this issue and the intense resistance to any sort of regulation.
All right, Mr. Critchley, that's all the time that we have. I thank you so much for taking out the time to join us and bring us that ground perspective from the United States of America.